Our story begins with our heroine remembering that this is the game she played for years, which was a smash hit when it was released. Unfortunately for her, she was reincarnated inside that game as the villainess, Tolia Fraser. She remembers that the original character was beautiful, but her personality was disgustingly corrupt. This villainess constantly harassed and insulted the story's heroine, Kuriko, who was the fiancée of the Grand Duke's heir. She was the typical embodiment of a villainess with a selfish, elitist, and arrogant personality, continuing to commit evil until the very end. She also remembers that this character is known as the Queen of Bad Endings. Regardless of the path, a bloody bad ending and an inevitable fate of doom always awaited her. Our heroine concludes her thoughts by lamenting her fate, wondering why, out of all possible characters, she had to be reincarnated as this trivial character. Our heroine sits in Tolia's body, trembling, thinking that what is happening to her cannot be real. Despite being the daughter of a marquis, her life now is worse than a beggar's, being served hard, stale bread, and the game system shows that this food deducts from her life points. Tolia thinks that dying in her previous life might have been better, but she quickly remembers that her previous life was also a complete disaster. She recalls scenes from her past when she was called honey. After the death of her mother and stepfather, she suffered mistreatment from her step-siblings, who kept trying to marry her off to strange men and threatening her. She recalls being in a car accident, and when she woke up, she found herself reincarnated as the character Tolia inside this game. Back in the present, Tolia looks at the hard bread and realizes that if she continues like this, she will die either from freezing or starvation. She wonders how a marquis's daughter could end up in this state, blaming her absent father. Toria's backstory is revealed. Her mother ran off with another man and died in an accident. Her father, Marquis Fraser, was disgusted and left the estate to go to the border, leaving his daughter behind without sending her any money to spend. Her father hasn't shown his face to her in years, and Tolia realizes this neglect is the Christmas gift mentioned in the game. She looks at a painting sent by her father and thinks sarcastically, wondering if he thinks sending one painting makes him a father, especially since he didn't even enclose a happy birthday note or even tell her he loved her. Tolia finds a similarity between her previous life and the original Tolia's life. In her past life as Hani, she had to live cautiously in her stepfather's house after her mother's marriage, relying entirely on herself. She believes Tolia might have lived the same way. She continues the comparison, remembering that in the past, no one cared if she ate dinner out 7 nights a week. Her resolve changes, and she decides she cannot continue living like this, and she refuses to die again. As she is determined to find a way to survive, a mysterious blue light suddenly appears before her, making her wonder what it is. The main quest window appears. The window identifies her as Tolia Fraser. Overall rating F-. The quest description was insulting, describing her as trash, bankrupt, and hated by everyone except one person, and that no one loves her. The goal is to reach rank A before the real one appears. Tolia looks in confusion, recognizing the window as the same quest window from the game she used to play. The quest window displays again, confirming the goal and description. Tolia processes the words, wondering if it meant her by trash, and realizes she is now on a real mission. She understands that the quest requires her to raise the character Tolia, meaning improving her stats. She looks at her horrendous stats. Personality, 10, wealth, 9, skill, -10, luck, 0, giving her an overall rating of F-. She despairs, wondering how she can improve such terrible stats. She focuses on the phrase before the real one appears and immediately deduces that the real one must mean Koro, the game's heroine. She clenches her fist, realizing she doesn't have much time before Koro appears, and she must reach rank A within this short period. She screams internally that this is impossible, especially with her F rating, before a sudden flash distracts her. A summary of her situation appears. She is Hani, an old player of the game who died in an accident. She ended up reincarnated as the villainess everyone called trash. And she realizes that once again, she is about to die. Wondering if this is a joke, a quest window appears summarizing the goal. She is the trash Tolia Fraser. Until the real one appears, she must achieve rank A to survive. A final warning follows. If she fails, she will die. Tolia looks at her stats window again and screams that this is impossible, wondering how anyone can survive with such awful stats. She compares her situation to the game's heroine, Kuro, who starts with at least an average C- rating. She remembers that unless the player was aiming for the hidden ending, there was no reason to choose this hellish difficulty. She holds her head in despair, realizing she is starting from F- and screams internally that the situation is simply asking her to die. She tries to catch her breath, deciding she needs to organize her thoughts. Tolia gathers her thoughts and sets her goal. What she needs to do now is raise all her stats to rank A. Since she doesn't know when the main heroine, Koro, will appear, she must reach this rank as quickly as possible. She tries to encourage herself, remembering that she is a strong-willed Korean who managed to take care of herself and get into a good university in her previous life, so she is capable of anything. She decides to start by looking for what she can do, thinking she might need an assistant to support her in her mission. Suddenly, she hears a voice and wonders in confusion who is coming as no one is supposed to visit her at this time. A young man with dark hair bursts into the room with a loud smile, announcing the arrival of the great Tedric and sarcastically wondering how she didn't even come out to greet him. Tolia recognizes him immediately. It's Tedric, her cousin, and she wonders why he came here. The events clarify that Tedric is the son of Viscount Lilius, the younger brother of Tolia's father, and the relationship between her and Tedric was always hostile like cats and dogs. Tedric, being from a side branch of the family and not a direct heir, always felt jealous of Tolia, who belonged to the direct lineage, and so he always picked fights with her. In contrast, he was very kind to the heroine Kuro and sided with her. Tolia thinks that since Kuriko isn't here now, she doesn't understand why he came to her. Tedric starts commenting in disgust about the foul smell in the place, wondering if this is a place where humans live, claiming the stench is giving him a headache. Tolia glares at him, thinking how much of a bastard he is. He continues his mockery, wondering why she made such a fuss at the banquet. In front of her grandfather, as long as she lives in such misery. He adds with a laugh that it's well known her father abandoned her, so why bother with that fact, and that this is why the grandfather put her under unlimited confinement. He calls her pathetic, angering Tolia, who thinks, how dare this scoundrel touch her wound like this? In that moment, Tolia, the reincarnated one, realizes the real reason why the original Tolia turned into a villainess. It was because of people like Tedric. She remembers not noticing this when she played the game from Koro's perspective, because all the Fraser family members surrounding the heroine, except Tolia, were good people. But now that she herself is in Tolia's position, living a life of contempt and mistreatment as an abandoned lady, she began to understand how anyone could become bitter in such circumstances, and even Tolia's evil deeds seemed logical to her now. While she is lost in thought, Tedric shouts at her, calling her a beggar and ordering her to lower her gaze and not stare at him. Tolia realizes that people like Tedric aren't bad because of the heroine's aura or any external force. They are just bad by nature. She thinks that hitting is the answer for such a bully. And as she thinks this, she picks up a fork. Tedric immediately panics and asks her in alarm what she intends to do. She scoffs internally at his reaction, wondering if he really thought she would stab him. She remembers that the original Tolia had stabbed his hand with a fork in the past, and it seems this terrifying memory is still stuck in his mind. She thinks that she would like to stab him again too, but she holds back since personality is part of her stats that must be raised to survive death. Stabbing him now would not be a wise choice. She decides to wait for now, realizing that Tedric's arrival means that person, his father, is also coming. Tedric interprets her retreat as submission and asks her mockingly if she has finally realized her place. He approaches her further and continues his insults, calling her a bastard child resulting from her mother's affair with a barbarian priest. Tolia tries to suppress her anger, telling herself by her old name, Hanina, to endure just a little longer. At that moment, a man's voice resounds, calling Tedric Fraser, reprimanding him, and wondering how he dares to say such things to his cousin. The man Tolia expected has arrived. It's Tedric Hunk's father, Viscount Lilius. Tedric tries to justify himself to his father, claiming that Tolia was the one who tried to stab him with a fork first. She, who had expected Lilius's arrival, notices that the Viscount seems unusually angry. Viscount Lilius continues to scold his son Tedric, who stands shocked by his father's vehemence. Lilius wonders how his son, raised by his mother as a precious person, dares to humiliate himself by dealing with a base girl like Tolia. She stands completely bewildered, realizing this situation is an unexpected development. Lilia shouts Tedric Fraser again, and his son answers in terror. Then he reveals the true reason for his anger. He warns Tedric that his grandfather, the Grand Duke Fraser, will arrive soon. He adds in a stern tone that if the Grand Duke heard what Tedric said, they would all die. Him, Lilius, and his mother. He orders him to shut his mouth completely. Tedric asks in shock why the grandfather is suddenly coming to this dilapidated place. Lilius replies that the reason is the Fraser banquet. Tolia, who is listening, picks up this information and wonders to herself what the Fraser banquet means. She immediately remembers that the Fraser banquet is a grand feast where all members of the Fraser family gather. She continues to analyze the situation. She knows the banquet is supposed to be held at the Grand Duke's main castle. Therefore, she wonders why the Grand Duke is stopping at Rantel Castle, the place where she lives. It becomes even stranger to her when she remembers that the Grand Duke has never come to visit her even once before. After Lilius finishes warning his son, he turns with a fake smile towards Tolia and calls her name. He tells her he has something for her and presents her with a box revealing a luxurious, shiny white dress. She wonders to herself if this is supposed to be a dress. Lilius orders her to wear this dress and come to the banquet, justifying it by saying that His Grace, the Grand Duke, despises shabby appearances. Tolia notices the dress looks extremely expensive and wonders why he is giving such a gift to her. Lilius approaches her, touches a lock of her hair, pats her, and tells her not to worry. This isn't a burdensome gift given for free. He continues with a cunning smile, explaining that her father, the Marquis, will pay for everything later anyway. Then he reveals his true intention. He admits that his financial circumstances are not very good right now, then mentions he saw the title deed for the ally land registered in her name. He suggests she use this deed as collateral, and in return he can buy her as many dresses as she wants. Tolia immediately realizes his true nature. Thinking to herself that this person is a dirty thief, she remembers the story path in the original game where the original Tolia trusted Lilius's words and borrowed a huge sum of money from him. But her father, Marcus Fraser, wasn't interested in her at all, and in the final part of the game, Lilius abandoned her, leaving her drowning under a mountain of debt. Even at that stage, the original Tolia clung to the hope that her father would save her. She used to think that her father must care about her, even a little, and that he would save her from this pile of debt. But the current reincarnated Tolia knows the bitter truth. No one ever cared about the poor Tolia. She realizes that if she accepts his offer now, she might succeed in raising her rating, but she will fall straight into the bankruptcy ending. She decides she must stop this path no matter what. She thinks about her options. She briefly considered using Lilius as an ally, but quickly concluded that someone who only wants to exploit her cannot be trusted with anything. Therefore, she decides to resort to an alternative. The person coming here now, the Grand Duke Fraser himself. She believes that if there is anyone who doesn't need to exploit her, like Lilius, the Grand Duke might be a much better option. She makes up her mind and decides she will try to target the Grand Duke Fraser. But she suddenly remembers what just happened when she met him. She remembers her grandfather's cold face as he asked her threateningly if she meant him when she said he could live happily alone. In a panic, she wonders if she already made the wrong choice by confronting the grandfather and that she never imagined he would look this scary. She puts her hands over her mouth in horror, wondering what is happening. She recalls her original plan. She was aware that the Grand Duke was the only person who could free her from her dire situation. Therefore, she had prepared herself to win his favor and beg him for her life. She wonders, but why? Why did she end up due to the penalty? Yelling at him, asking him if he thought he would escape punishment while living comfortably alone. She remembers her shock and horror at that moment, covering her mouth and wondering about the words that just came out of her mouth. The scene flashes back to Tolia's first meeting with her grandfather, Grand Duke Assis, who calls her name Tolia Fraser and asks her in a chilling tone if she was talking to him. She covers her mouth, trembling in terror, thinking to herself that this wasn't her intention at all. All she was trying to say was to ask him to lift the probation imposed on her. Suddenly, she hears a familiar chime and wonders in panic if that was the sound of the status window. 2 warning windows appear in front of her. The first repeats that the personality penalty will make her say only what provokes the utmost hostility, and the second warns her that her reputation will drop to a dangerous level. She panics and wonders what is happening. She realizes what she just said was because of her personality stat. She finds this ridiculous. Although she knows the stat is bad, she wonders how she is supposed to survive if the system prevents her from even saying a single word as she wishes. She realizes this situation is even worse than dealing with the loan shark Lilas, or begging the Maris, her father, who is stranger than strangers to her. She holds her head, screaming internally, realizing she is in a worse mess than she imagined. She remembers she knew exactly how to win the Grand Duke's favor. When she played as Koro, he quickly became a loving father-in-law to her. She cries in despair, wondering if the difference between a C rating, which Koro started with, and an F rating, which she started with, is supposed to be this huge. She realizes she must find a way out of this situation, and fast. Suddenly, something else distracts her, making her wonder, what now? She notices something strange. A gauge bar appears above the Grand Duke's head, sitting in front of her. She looks closely, wondering if she's hallucinating. But the bar slowly starts turning red. The bar fills up with bright red, and she screams, "It's really turning red." She panics. She knows from her gaming experience that a status bar turning red is never a good thing. She wonders if this is an anger or patience meter. Fearing she might be heading towards a death ending if it fills up completely, she decides she cannot die like this. Refusing to die helplessly as she did in her previous life, she reminds herself that this game is Kuriko's stage, and she doesn't aspire to a beautiful story like hers. Her only goal is to reach rank A to live a rich and comfortable life. All she dreams of is waking up in a warm palace, eating proper meals, and strolling in a flowery garden and reading fun books every day. All she wants is to enjoy a simple and ordinary life. To achieve that, she must first stop this thing, the red bar. She decides she will survive no matter what. She realizes that if she opens her mouth now without thinking, she might make things worse. Her first goal is to figure out how to get rid of this damned personality penalty. She thinks that the penalty doesn't have a specific cancellation command, so it can't be disabled by a simple action. She wonders if she should raise the personality stat first, but she's unsure if she can do that right now. A system window appears telling her that stats can be raised using available coins, and it shows she currently has 1,000 coins. Toria is surprised, wondering about this system of raising stats with coins. She thinks that she never saw this feature when she played as Koro, and her anxiety increases when she sees another warning stating that cancellation is impossible. After confirmation, she decides to ignore her fears. She must survive first and foremost. She decides to raise the stat now. With a chiming sound, multiple windows appear. Personality 0 achieved. All coins used. Personality penalty deactivated. She realizes with joy that she has succeeded. While she is immersed in her joy, the Grand Duke, who is watching her blank out, calls her name Tolia. Freed from the penalty, she quickly prostrates herself before him and shouts, calling him grandfather. The Grand Duke looks at her in surprise, as do Lilius and Tedric, who are standing in the background, shocked by her action. She seizes the opportunity and starts speaking, explaining tragically that the budget given to her is so small that all the staff in her castle are starving. And as their lady, she can no longer stand by and watch. She continues speaking while prostrated, adding that she knows he might think the budget is insufficient because she was buying luxuries, but she swears on her name that this is not the case. She continues her plea while prostrated, proposing that she is willing to give up her marriage entirely if he can provide her with her dowry in advance. She explains that she will use this money first to pay off her debts to her uncle Lilas. And then, before she can finish her sentence, Viscount Lilius lunges at her and violently covers her mouth with his hand, yelling her name. He asks her angrily about this insolence she is showing in front of His Grace, the Grand Duke. He leans towards her and whispers threateningly, calling her an evil child who dares to spread such unbelievable lies as if they were the truth. Tolia looks at him in shock, barely able to think, wondering what he is doing. Lilia starts dragging her away from the Grand Duke while she resists, shouting that it's not a lie and pleading for His Grace to hear her. He turns to apologize to his father, the Grand Duke, saying that Tolia's wild horse-like behavior is nothing new, but he admits he was negligent. She looks in horror at the red gauge bar above her grandfather's head, noticing it's about to fill up completely. Despair washes over her as she thinks about her future collapsing. Her dream of reaching rank A and living a comfortable retired life. Her small and great dream of never worrying about money again. At that moment, the Grand Duke orders Lilas in a calm but firm voice to let her go. Tolia freezes in place, surprised and wondering if he will listen to her. Lilas also looks confused. The Grand Duke repeats his order in an undeniable tone, ordering him to let her go. She notices with joy that the red gauge bar is starting to fade. She wonders to herself if it worked. Lilas immediately complies, bowing and apologizing to his father. Then the Grand Duke turns to her and tells her to continue what she was saying. She stands stunned, wondering why the Grand Duke is suddenly listening to what she has to say. Her eyes sparkle, realizing that regardless of the reason, this is a chance that will never come again. She quickly composes herself, returns to a prostrating position, and thanks her grandfather. She continues her plea, confirming she will use her dowry to pay the debt to her uncle Lilas, and after that she will live as if she were dead. She continues her vows that she will not only take care of herself but also the servants of Rantel Castle and maintain her fitness and dignity. Finally, she pleads boldly, asking him if he could show more generosity and lift the indefinite probation he placed on her, concluding her appeal with a cry as she begs her grandfather. A heavy silence fills the room. Cold sweat starts to drip from her, and she wonders anxiously why it's so quiet and if she said something wrong again. She fears this wasn't an opportunity, but just the excuse the Grand Duke needed to punish her. The Grand Duke breaks the silence, but not by answering her, but by calling his son Lilas. Lilius answers his father nervously. The Grand Duke begins to question him, asking him if the matter of the children's household affairs wasn't entrusted to him and his wife. Lilas confirms this, bowing. The Duke continues sharply, asking why Tolia is still under the probation she received 3 years ago. He adds that the idea of her believing the one-month probation was indefinite must be the doing of Lilas and his wife. Tolia listens to this dialogue in complete shock. She thinks to herself, wondering if their words, Lilius's and Tedrick's words, were lies. She immediately remembers Tedrick's mockery and his words to her earlier, and she realizes the horrifying truth. It wasn't indefinite, but only for 1 month. She comprehends that she received the probation 3 years ago, and it has continued all this time illegally. She realizes that this confinement order is what drove the original Tolria, who was already suffering from a harsh environment, to rely pathetically on Lilas. She reaches an unavoidable conclusion. This is all lies from Lilius and his family. Lilas, sweating profusely, tries to squirm out of the situation, claiming there must have been a mistake. But the Grand Duke continues his pressure, asking if it was also a mistake that Tolia Fraser believes a storage room is Rantel Castle. Lilas freezes, unable to answer. The Grand Duke reveals that he remembers clearly that it was Lilius's wife who reported to him that Tolia was still unruly even after her 1-month probation ended, and that she herself insisted on living in a storage room, crying and making a fuss. She is hit with another shock, thinking this isn't even Rantel Castle. She realizes that when she heard the Grand Duke was coming, she simply assumed this was her residence. Lilas is forced to laugh nervously, trying to save the situation. He exclaims that there must be a misunderstanding, claiming that he and his wife never told Tolia this place was Rantel Castle, nor did they ever tell her her probation was indefinite. Then, in a desperate move, he turns to Tolia with a fake smile and asks her in a falsely sweet tone if she was mistaken, and who the evil person who deceived her was, and that he would teach them a lesson they would never forget. She looks at him coldly, thinking to herself how ridiculous it is to call her evil or trash. When compared to the real trash, Tolia is nothing. Then she asks him in a calm voice if he really intends to teach that person a lesson. And Lilius, clearly nervous, replies, confirming that of course he will. Her eyes narrow with determination, and she thinks to herself that she will show those real trash the true meaning of a lesson. She clearly remembers the voices of their insults. Tedric's voice mocking the pathetic smell of the place, asking her why she made a fuss at the banquet as long as her father had abandoned her, and she remembers the fundamental lie they built their deception on, the one where they said her grandfather put her under indefinite probation. Repeating sarcastically in her mind how pathetic, she seizes the opportunity and reuses the very words she heard from Tedric before, saying sarcastically that she must know her place, as she is, after all, just a bastard child, then continues sharply. The bastard child her mother had. After an affair with a barbarian priest, Tedric is stunned upon hearing her, thinking, in shock and horror, that what she is saying is beyond belief. Wondering frantically if she has lost her mind, Tedric screams at her, angry and shocked. At that moment, the Duke's angry voice resounds in the hall, calling Tedric Fraser. Tedric turns to find his grandfather, the Grand Duke in a state of extreme rage, and can only utter grandfather. In terror, the Grand Duke confronts him, asking him sharply if those were the words he just spoke. Tedric tries to back down, stammering that what happened was just a misunderstanding. Talia watches the situation with satisfaction, thinking that it's time for the real trash to get a taste of their own medicine. The scene shifts to an explanation of a tradition in the Fraser family. While every prestigious noble family has an heirloom jewel, the members of the Fraser family receive a magnificent and expensive necklace when they first enter society. Of course, Tedric was no exception to this rule. Back to the confrontation. The Grand Duke calls his grandson Tedric Fraser in a terrifying tone. Tedric cries out in pain as he thought the Duke was going to strike him. His grandfather announces his punishment, that for the time being he will strip him of the honor of Fraser that was granted to him, referring to the necklace. After he finishes punishing Tedric, the Grand Duke turns to Tolia and calls her name, and she looks at him with hope. The Duke announces his decision regarding her, that from this day forward she will reside in the main family headquarters. She stands completely shocked, barely able to believe what she heard, wondering in amazement how she could be invited to stay at the main headquarters. After the Grand Duke's visit, many things changed. The most notable change was the disappearance of the duo, Lilius and Tedric, who had constantly sought out Tolia to provoke her. She thinks they probably chose to hide and reflect on their actions until the Grand Duke's anger subsides. As for her, she was moved to the main headquarters of the Fraser ducal family. She looks at the enormous palace in awe, thinking how incredibly huge it is when seen in person. She feels relieved, realizing she somehow managed to survive inside this game. She is led to her new room, a spacious, bright space filled with luxurious furniture. She exclaims with joy, wondering if this is really her room. An elegant man confirms that it is, and she delights in how beautiful the room is, wondering if it's really acceptable for her to have all this splendor to herself. The man introduces himself as Luke Kilbasher, the Grand Duke's direct aide, and kindly asks her to feel comfortable and consider the place her home. She thanks him. Tolia thinks about her luck. As soon as her confinement was lifted, she was given this wonderful room, which shows how generous the Grand Duke is. On top of that, he assigned his direct aide to accompany her. She wishes to herself that since he is so generous, it would be wonderful if he gave her a budget too. Luke interrupts her thoughts to tell her there is one more thing he must convey to her. He presents her with a letter, explaining that this is something the master of the house is giving her, Miss Tolia. She asks worriedly if this is from the Grand Duke. She immediately feels suspicious, thinking that since her grandfather hasn't completely forgiven her yet, this might be a warning letter ordering her to behave well or something like that. But Luke clarifies that this is her monthly allowance. She asks him in astonishment if this is really her allowance. She opens the letter, looks at the written number, and starts counting the zeros in shock, moving from ones to millions until she reaches an unbelievable number, 1 billion. She looks at Luke in disbelief and asks him if this is really her allowance. He calmly confirms it with a nod. Luke Kilbusher finishes his duties, wishing Lady Tolia a good rest before taking his leave. She is left alone, staring in a daze at the paper confirming the number. She keeps thinking that they really wrote 1 billion. She realizes she has become rich. Suddenly, a ringing sound from the system is heard, making her wonder in confusion what is happening. A series of system windows appears before her, successfully announcing the upgrade of her wealth stat. She exclaims in surprise and amazement. She feels greatly relieved, realizing her wealth stat has finally reached 0. After being in the negative, this is followed by another system window informing her that she has received the first upgrade bonus, which is an additional 1,000 coins, raising her coin balance to 1,000. She also notices her overall rating has risen to F after being F-. The system window continues to confirm her receipt of the 1,000 coins and her rating reaching F. She feels overjoyed, surprised by receiving a bonus of 1,000 coins. She starts thinking about how to use this bonus. She wonders if she should boost her weaker stats like skill or luck, or if she should simply accumulate more financial power. She also considers another option, investing everything in beauty, especially since it's already her highest base stat. She looks at herself in the mirror and backs off from the idea, thinking her current state isn't that bad. She concludes that raising the beauty stat to a level probably wouldn't offer her much additional benefit anyway. She tries to style her hair, thinking that just a simple touch would make her beauty stand out more, but she tries to comb it somehow and notices the result looks wrong and strange. Suddenly, her hair turns into a wild, messy mess, as if a disaster struck it. She screams internally in panic, wondering why combing resulted in this catastrophe. She looks at her stats window, which shows her skill stat is -10, and realizes the truth. She finds it unbelievable, concluding that this mess happened because her skill stat is absolutely disastrous. She frantically tries to fix her hair, screaming internally that this is a lie, wondering how she is supposed to walk around looking like this, demanding her hair go back to normal. She gives up in despair. Feeling doomed, she starts to seriously consider whether she should use the 1,000 coins she got to raise the skill stat immediately. But she strongly rejects this idea, thinking she cannot waste 1,000 coins on something like this. She feels wasting it would be too pitiful and sad. She decides to simply wait for the maid who will surely know how to comb her hair properly. Suddenly, a new system notification appears telling her she has acquired 2 coins, bringing her balance to 1.02. She wonders in confusion why she received 2 coins. She continues to wonder why she was suddenly given 2 coins. When all she did was turn her hair into a broom, an idea flashes in her mind, and she realizes she finally understood the meaning of the increase in coins. She stands up confidently, concluding that this means the value of her effort is being converted into coins. The scene shifts to the past several years ago. A younger Tolia is shown, bowing before her grandfather in obvious fear, muttering a flustered greeting to him. The Grand Duke reminisces in his thoughts. She was stammering, asking about his health. He remembers her as the granddaughter who could never look him directly in the eye. He remembers her expression was trembling so much she couldn't speak clearly, and her expression held nothing but absolute fear and terror. He continues thinking, but then remembers the recent scene when she yelled at him about living lavishly, and finds this transformation truly bizarre. He wonders about the change of heart that made her act this way. The scene returns to the Grand Duke's present. He grants someone permission to enter, and Luke enters. Luke excuses himself, then informs him that as ordered he has escorted Lady Tolia to her room. The Grand Duke tells him he has done well and appreciates his efforts. Luke adds that there is something else. The Grand Duke looks at him, wondering what it is. He presents a covered basket, explaining that Lady Tolia asked him to deliver it to him. The Grand Duke asks in surprise if she made this. Luke confirms, saying, "Yes, Your Grace." The Grand Duke contemplates the gift he received, which is a jar, and wonders to himself if what's inside is jam. Meanwhile, Tolia thinks about what she realized during her failed attempt to comb her hair. She concludes that the ancients were right. There is nothing one cannot do if they keep trying. She reaches the first conclusion. She can earn coins regardless of the kind of effort she puts in. She realizes that earning coins is not limited to improving her appearance, but includes any act that helps her become better than she is now. This is why she believes she earned coins even from trying to comb her hair. After this discovery, she starts to wonder what she should do next and concluded that the answer is simple. Effort and creativity lead to innovation. And from this homemade jam was born. She remembers that the Grand Duke liked handmade gifts even in the game. Therefore, she devises a plan. If she keeps gifting him handmade jam, even if it's poorly made, maybe one day she can win his favor. She laughs sardonically, realizing that due to the skill penalty, low rating, both her hair and the jam she makes are disasters, but she consoles herself that it's just jam and the Grand Duke won't actually eat it anyway. She realizes there's a limit to what she can earn this way. She feels frustrated that this is the time she needs help, but she doesn't even have a personal maid. She deduces this is most likely because of Baron Lilas, who manages all the family's affairs. She devises a plan to use this situation to her advantage. She realizes the servants will definitely talk about her state. Since Lilius cares about the family's reputation, he will eventually be forced to send her a maid, thus achieving two goals at once. She is shown presenting the jam basket to Luke with a wide smile, telling him cheerfully that she is counting on him again today. Luke asks her gently if she made the homemade jam again today. She confirms enthusiastically, adding that she doubts her grandfather will eat it anyway. Luke thinks to himself that the Grand Duke usually doesn't pay much attention to such gifts, but he hesitates to complete his thought. He clears his throat in embarrassment as he sees the messy state of her hair from behind. He suggests they return to her room soon, explaining that the meeting is ending and people are starting to wander around. She agrees and prepares to go back. Tolia thanks Luke for accompanying her. As she expected, two maids start whispering about her. One asks the other if she saw Lady Tolia's hair. The other confirms she did, wondering why it looks like it exploded. The first maid asks if Baron Lilius really didn't assign her a maid. The second replies that maybe that rumor is true. The maid reveals the rumor that Baron Lilas secretly envies his older brother. The first maid concludes in shock that this is the reason then why he is persecuting his niece. The second maid confirms her words, pointing out to the first that they haven't seen any servant enter Lady Tolia's room since she arrived, which convinces the other of the rumor's truth. Earlier, a lady, Lilius's wife, is shown, wondering angrily how that girl, Tolia, who lost her mother and whom they fed and sheltered, dares to forget her place and cause harm to her son, Tedric. The lady's identity is revealed. She is Aubrey Fraser, Baron Lilius's wife. Aubrey finds the situation unacceptable and orders one of the maids to go teach Tolia a lesson sufficient to make her remember her true place. She adds that if Tolia has any bit of intelligence, she will understand the message. The maid bows and replies, "Yes, madam." The maid, assigned the task, smiles slightly, vowing to Tolia and thinking that she will make her regret smearing Lord Lilius's reputation. The maid arrives at Tolia's room and tells her it's time for dinner. She grants her entry. When she sees the food, she expresses admiration for how delicious it looks, thanking the maid and assuring her she will eat well. She feels happy that her plan worked exactly as she expected. It seems Lilius cares about appearances. He finally sent her a decent meal. She notices a maid came with the meal this time, and as she eats, she thinks happily that she can finally ask her to fix her hair, but she suddenly stops, feeling a sharp pain in her mouth, and wonders in shock. What is this? She looks at the plate in front of her, wondering if she bit into something hard. She spits out small pieces, realizing in horror that this is a stone. She spits out the stone and immediately realizes this is the maid's doing. She wonders if the maid is acting on orders or just out of hatred for Tolia. Either way, she realizes treating the Grand Duke's only niece this way is dangerous and thinks about whether she should expose the culprit. Suddenly, her thoughts are interrupted by a voice calling her name, asking what's wrong with her. She turns around in surprise. She recognizes the newcomer. It's Aubrey, Lilius's wife. She wonders why she is here. Aubrey notices the food, pointing out she sees her in the middle of dinner. Aubrey adds that she heard her niece had arrived, so she decided to visit. Then she looks at the stones next to the plate and comments in a sarcastic tone that it seems someone played a nasty prank. Tolia immediately realizes this must also be the doing of Lilios and his wife. She recalls what she has been through. She thought she could endure everything, even when she was served only apples instead of meals. And even when she was left alone without a single servant, she believed that no matter how cruel was, she could endure. But this act, putting stones in her food, is beyond pathetic, and she feels she can no longer take them seriously. Aubrey calls out to Tolia and steps towards her. She thinks to herself in astonishment, wondering why Aubrey is approaching her now after all that torment. She continues to think angrily. How dare Aubrey show anger towards her? She is surprised by Aubrey falling to the ground in a collapse, thinking how ridiculous this situation is. Tolia is surprised by the reaction as Aubrey's attitude completely changes in an instant. Aubrey screams at the maid after slapping her across the face, asking her how she dares to commit such filth against her precious niece. She stands stunned, wondering what is happening. She was sure Aubrey would blame her and wonders about this strange shift. The maid is shown trembling with fear, trying to stammer that she was just Aubrey cuts her off sharply, screaming at her, "How dare you speak?" Aubrey turns to Tolia with a fake gentle tone, expressing regret for the scare she must have had. She asks Tolia what she should do with this maid, assuring her that, as always, she will do whatever Tolia desires. These words raise her suspicions. She wonders why Aubrey is suddenly acting this way and about her offer to fulfill her wishes. She realizes Aubrey didn't come all this way just to check on her and concludes she must have an ulterior motive. Tolia decides to test the situation. She tells her Aunt Aubrey that she is the one managing the household, so she will leave the matter to her. But she adds one condition. She doesn't want to see any more violence in this precious room her grandfather gave her. Aubrey smiles slightly, asking if that's what she wants, then agrees, saying, "All right." Immediately, she turns and orders the guards to drag that insolent maid to the dungeon. The guards comply immediately. She is shocked again, wondering why Aubrey would banish a maid she is sure she planned it herself. The dungeon is too harsh a punishment. The maid is dragged away screaming, begging my Lady Aubrey to wait, claiming she was set up. She continues to scream that she was just following orders. The maid keeps screaming as she's dragged away, pleading for the young Miss Tolia to listen to her and save her, repeating, "I was set up before the door is slammed shut behind her." Aubrey turns to Tolia, shedding fake tears, claiming she sent the maid to serve Tolia and that her heart as an aunt is breaking because the maid did such a thing. Tolia watches this scene, thinking that Aubrey is the one who sent her, and now she's disposing of her. She wonders what Aubrey is planning. She continues her act, saying that the position of maid cannot be left vacant. In that case, she offers to recommend a new maid for Tolia. Aubrey enthusiastically announces that she knows some good talents. Tolia realizes in that moment what is happening. Understanding the real reason behind Aubrey's easy disposal of the first maid, the picture becomes clear in her mind. Aubrey was worried about the Grand Duke, so she couldn't plant her real maid from the beginning. Instead, she sent a disposable maid to create a pretext for harassing Tolia. She finds herself in a bind, thinking about how to refuse this offer. She realizes she can't simply refuse. There are too many things to consider. Aubrey claps her hands, ordering the candidates for the head maid position to be brought in. 2 maids enter. Aubrey tells her she felt these 2 would be able to serve her well and asks her to choose one of them to be her head maid. Aubrey introduces the first maid, explaining her name is Rilda, and she comes from a noble family, where her father held the title of baronet. Then she introduces the second maid, who introduces herself as Adele, and Aubrey describes her as quick-witted and sharp. She adds that this description only applies to her being from the borderlands. Tolia is shocked, wondering in confusion what Aubrey just said, repeating the term borderlands to herself. She recalls the definition of the borderlands, a place also known as the land forsaken by the gods, a vast, desolate land located in the far east of the empire. It's a kind of slum, and rumors circulate about it being infested with heretics and cannibals. She realizes Aubrey is being deliberate with this choice. In the refined high society, where a maid's origin is important, bringing someone from the borderlands is a very obvious act intended to prevent her from being chosen. It was clear that Rilda was the one Aubrey wanted her to choose. She thinks that her former self, the original Tolia, would have chosen Rilda without hesitation. She hesitates, realizing that if she chooses Adele, her reputation might be affected due to her maid's reputation, which could negatively impact her stats. She is confused about the best thing to do in this situation. Suddenly, a new system window she had never seen before appears, offering a view profile option. She realizes that if she checks both their profiles, she will definitely know who to choose. She decides to start with Adele's profile. The profile shows Adele is 40 years old from the borderlands, started serving in the Fraser ducal house at the age of 20, and showed outstanding work performance. She sees this isn't much different from the explanation Aubrey gave, but she notices a button dedicated to secrets. She hesitates for a moment, wondering if pressing see more will automatically cost her coins as a kind of trap. But she decides she has nothing to lose and presses it. The secret is revealed. Adele's hidden secret is that she is the hidden younger sister of the Grand Duke's aide, Luke Kilbusher. Additional information states that Luke Kilbusher feels immense guilt towards Adele. She is extremely shocked, wondering in disbelief how Adele could be Luke's younger sister. She focuses on the additional information, stating that Luke feels immense guilt towards Adele. Toya calls out to her Aunt Aubrey. Aubrey asks her enthusiastically if she is chosen, suggesting that Rilda would surely be better and suit her dignity. She answers her with a no. She smiles and announces that she will choose Adele to be her head maid. The scene shifts to later where Adele is combing Tolia's hair. Adele tells Miss Tolia that the tangled part is gone, and she thanks her for her hard work. She thanks her. She thinks that Adele is good at her job and also kind, which makes her feel comfortable. She wonders if this is because she and Luke are siblings. Tolia thinks that after appointing Adele, Aubrey and all the other maids were stunned and couldn't say anything. She concludes they were probably shocked at her choosing a maid from the borderlands. But for her, as soon as she saw Adele's profile settings, her origin no longer mattered. She wonders how she could not choose Luke Kilbusher's hidden sister. This information would surely be useful to her. She wonders about the nature of this guilt that Luke feels towards his sister. She feels overjoyed that her hair is back to normal, thinking she can finally walk around with decent hair and that she is back to her old self and even looks better than before. She sighs, wishing things would stay calm like this. She thinks that she can't believe how the wealth stat problem, which seemed like the biggest obstacle, was resolved so easily. She considers it lucky that the Lilius couple was this stupid. She decides she will raise the rest of her stats one by one, realizing the only thing left is her bad reputation. She realizes that no matter how hard she tries to raise her stats, she won't be able to get an A rating if everyone hates her. To raise her reputation, she has to enter the main episode and solve incidents just like Kiko did. This inevitably means she will have to meet the male leads in the story. She thinks she must at least leave an impression on them, even if she doesn't aim to raise their affection level for her. And to be able to meet them, she needs to be able to move freely, which requires her to obtain the direct lineage necklace. She realizes her debutante ball is still too far away, so she has to find another way. She wonders if she should try to raise the Grand Duke's affection level, then ask him for the necklace. She remembers that in Koro's time, the higher his affection level, the easier it was to ask him for favors. She looks for a quick way to raise his affection level. One option is to present large quantities of handmade jam, but there's a limit to what she can make in one day. Besides, Adele won't stand by and watch her exhaust herself making jam and will ask her to rest. Tolia thinks that if she gives the Duke jam made by Adele, the gift will lose its handmade meaning. The Grand Duke will notice she didn't make it herself, and thus his affection level won't rise, and he might even think this is definitely not Tolia's making. Tolia continues to think, wondering how to raise the Grand Duke's affection level. She wonders if she should try to exploit an upcoming event to her advantage. She remembers that the closest event is the meeting regarding the status planes. Events clarify that the status planes was land that players had to acquire to see the ending in the game. It was also the place where Lilius and the third son, Fraser Nigella, pushed hard to establish a horse ranch project. Of course, she remembered that the game story made it clear that the horse ranch project had failed miserably. This gives her an idea, and she wonders what would happen if she voted against the project in the meeting. She concludes that the horse ranch project will fail anyway. By opposing it, she will protect that land and prevent a loss for the Fraser family. She sees this as an opportunity to show her diligent side by preventing this loss. Additionally, she plans to show her capable side in family affairs to raise their affection level for her. Besides all that, she remembers that she also has the right to use the voting right, and she is confident that if she uses it, she can defeat her uncles. But she smiles slightly, realizing there is an obstacle. She cannot go to a meeting of this importance with her current stats. She wonders if she should use the coins she had been saving. The scene shifts to the meeting room in the Grand Duke's palace. Lilius thinks that today is finally the day to take control of the status planes. He comments to the Count's representative beside him, noting that it took a long time to put this matter on the Council's agenda. The representative, Neville Fraser's representative, agrees, but expresses hesitation. He asks if this is right, reminding him that it was the land the late Grand Duchess cherished dearly. He imagines that His Grace, the Grand Duke, might have considered canceling the vote because of that. He laughs sarcastically, telling the representative he doesn't know his father well. He explains that his father and mother were practically mortal enemies, famous for their hostility. He asks sarcastically if the representative really thinks his father would care what happens to the land his mother loved. He continues that all that matters is expanding their business and winning the Empress's favor. The representative notes that they seem to be the only members of the direct family present today. He reassures him not to worry, confirming there will be no null votes. He smiles confidently, declaring that the approval votes will easily win the majority. At that moment, the arrival of His Grace, the Grand Duke, is announced. The Duke enters and sits on his throne. Lilas quickly greets his father, wishing him a good morning and asking if he rested well last night. The Grand Duke ignores the greeting and coldly orders everyone to be seated. Then he announces the start of the meeting. The session chairman begins the proceedings, announcing that this council convenes in the honor of the Fraser family. He asks all attendees to swear and pledge to uphold the dignity befitting their direct lineage. He listens sternly and looks at the empty seat beside him. A quick memory of his late wife calling his name, Essie, flashes through his mind. He frowns and clenches his hand tightly. Affected by the memory, the chairman continues, announcing they will now move to the emergency voting session. He clarifies that the attendees are two representatives, Lilius Fraser and the proxy for Nigella Fraser. Suddenly, a voice interrupts the proceedings, asking them to wait a moment. Lilius and the Grand Duke turn in surprise. The voice apologizes for the delay. Tolia Fraser enters the hall, announcing her attendance at the Direct Lineage Council meeting. She apologizes, explaining that this is her first time looking for the council hall, and so she lost her way. The chairman welcomes her, confirming it's all right and that any direct descendant of the Fraser family has the right to attend this meeting. She thanks him. Lilius looks at her with intense anger, thinking to himself, wondering what that troublemaker is doing here suddenly and what she is planning now. Neville's representative whispers to Baron Lilas, telling him to calm down. The representative reassures him that even if that child votes against them, it won't change anything. He confirms that the approval votes will form a majority anyway, so there's no need to worry. He calms down, convinced the representative is right. He thinks to himself that he doesn't know what that fool is planning by showing her face, but he is sure there is nothing she can really do. He decides that if she starts speaking nonsense, he will order her thrown out and vows he will make her regret coming. The chairman officially announces that there are 3 direct family members present, then declares the meeting open. The chairman explains that the agenda concerns the authorization for commercial development on the status planes. According to family law, he asks those in favor to raise their hands. Lilius and the other representative raise their hands, while he notices Tolia did not raise hers. He thinks sarcastically that it doesn't matter. Her vote only represents one person and wonders what foolish thoughts she brought with her. He addresses her, pointing out sarcastically that it seems his niece opposes the development of the status planes. She smiles and confirms, of course, and that she naturally opposes it. He comments coolly that her answer is bold while the Grand Duke remains silent. He adds mockingly, asking if she even knows where the status planes are located, adding that he is curious to hear her reason. She replies with a calm smile, explaining that the chairman already explained the location before the meeting started, and her uncle must not have been listening. He is shocked by her sharp retort and is left speechless. She continues with a smile, confirming he asked for her reason for opposing, didn't he? She begins to present her argument, explaining that the status plains are damp and soft, making them unsuitable for raising horses. She adds that despite its central location and ease of connection to the capital, its area is too vast, meaning profits from development would be minuscule compared to the investment size. Then she asks them with a sly smile if they considered the cost of entertaining the nobles who would visit the site. She rejoices internally, considering this a smashing success, and thinks her decision to raise her stats last night was genius. A flashback to last night appears where she used her coins, and the system announced +1 skill achieved and skill penalty removed, leaving her with 993 coins. She noted that raising the skill didn't cost as many coins as she thought. She felt satisfied thinking that after raising her stats, she wouldn't make the same verbal mistakes as before. A new system window appeared, announcing the opening of the skill stat, allowing her to buy skill-related titles. She was surprised by this new system, noting it wasn't in the original game and wondered if this was an exclusive feature for Toria. She opened the store and saw many available options like Master of Words, Homemade Jam Expert, and Walking Encyclopedia. She realized she could buy and use these titles from now on. She found what suited her perfectly and decided to buy 2 skills in preparation for tomorrow's meeting. The skills she chose were Master of Words and Walking Encyclopedia. She considered the encyclopedia skill would be very useful for someone like her who doesn't know this world well. The skills cost her 200 coins, but she didn't regret it. The skill descriptions explained that Master of Words adds 10% persuasive power to speech and reduces the chance of saying something wrong, and Walking Encyclopedia grants general knowledge in all fields. Back at the meeting, Lilia slams the table angrily, yelling at Tolia, asking what she could possibly know. He continues shouting that the land was personally inspected by Her Majesty the Empress and that she agreed to provide horses for the project. He accuses her of daring to challenge Her Majesty personally. She replies calmly and confidently using her new skill, asking her uncle if the authority over the entire equestrian project doesn't belong to His Majesty the Emperor alone. He stammers in shock, thinking to himself how she could possibly know something like that. She smiles, calls his name, and advises him not to be so obsessed with the imperial family that he abandons the Fraser family's pride. He flies into a rage, calling her insolent and wondering how she dares to speak to her uncle this way. She ignores Lilas and addresses her grandfather directly. She tells him this plan will only bring shame upon the family's honor and declares her opposition to proceeding with the commercial use of the plains. At this time, Lilas intervenes in a panic, begging his father not to pay attention to that child's words. He insists they already have 2 supporting votes, which is the majority, and that the opinion of an ignorant little girl means nothing. She interrupts him calmly, telling him he is mistaken. She explains that according to family law, they are allowed to vote by proxy on behalf of direct family members during council meetings. She adds sarcastically that this matter probably doesn't concern him as his son Tedric is still under disciplinary suspension. Then Tolia Fraser delivers her finishing blow, announcing that she, on behalf of her father and her twin brothers, members of the Mary family, cast a total of 4 votes, all opposing the proposal. She concludes her presentation by asking if anyone has any objections. The chairman announces he will declare the results immediately. The chairman announces that the result of the meeting regarding the authorization for commercial use of the status plains is a total of 2 votes in favor and a total of 4 votes against. Accordingly, the meeting concludes with the rejection of the use of the plains. The meeting concludes. Lilas feels overwhelming anger, telling them this is ridiculous. He continues to shout that this can't be happening and that her suddenly appearing at the meeting and using this trick is absurd. The Grand Duke calls his son Lilas. He asks him coldly if he just described the family law as a trick. He immediately backtracks, stammering that he didn't mean that. He is forced to apologize. She feels successful, thinking that it was definitely worth getting the skill title. She thinks the important thing now is whether this act raised the Grand Duke's affection level for her. She tries to read her grandfather's expressions, but can't, so she doesn't know what he is thinking. She notices the affection level window appears and disappears on its own, wondering if she should buy a feature, with coins later to be able to see it. The Grand Duke calls her. She stands up and answers, asking him what he wants. He orders her to follow him, then stands up and leaves the hall. She follows him, wondering what he has to say that requires changing locations. The Grand Duke enters an incredibly luxurious room. She is astonished by the opulence of the place and wonders about the nature of this room. She thinks that she doesn't believe even Koro has seen this room before, despite her wandering into almost every room in the palace. She notices the room doesn't look used, with almost no trace of use in it. She wonders why the Duke brought her to a place like this. She gathers her courage and asks her grandfather why they are here. The Grand Duke addresses her, pointing out that she hasn't attended a single meeting all this time, and yet he wondered how she knew she could use the proxy vote. She hesitates slightly, thinking to herself if he suspects her, because this behavior is unlike the original Tolia, but she quickly decides this situation is better for a granddaughter acting differently from her usual image. It would be better for him to think she studied hard separately. She answers that she read a book about family law in the main building's library a long time ago, and she remembered what she read then. The Grand Duke seems somewhat surprised, repeating her words, wondering if she read a book about family law. He suddenly asks her which generation of the Fraser family the Duke belongs to, and when the family was promoted from a douche to a Grand Douche. She answers that it is the 17th generation, and the promotion began from the 5th generation, Lord Sol Fraser, who defeated the barbarians, deciphered the ancient language, and discovered a dragon's bone. She is internally annoyed by his suspicion, thinking he is a man so harsh that he even doubts her reading a book. He could have simply praised his granddaughter for reading a book she had never read before. However, she feels relieved that the questions the Duke asked were within the passive range of her skill. She thinks how unfair the situation would have become if she knew the answer but couldn't respond due to the original Toria's low stats. The Grand Duke tells her she has surprised him several times today. She sighs in relief, feeling the suspicions have dissipated for now. He continues saying, "The insubordination she committed today was the most surprising," referring to her bold heart in overturning the vote result against her uncles in a public place. He describes her act as very daring. She becomes tense. She realizes that for the Duke, who values hierarchy and family, her actions might indeed seem like insubordination. The Grand Duke concludes his speech saying he will overlook what she did today because it's the first time. But he warns her that starting from next time, she stands before her grandfather, wondering if he is curious to know the reason that drove her to act this way. A determined look appears in her eyes. She is thinking she doesn't intend to apologize and end it there. She didn't do this with half-hearted resolve. She continues to think that she still has a lot to say, and she will say everything she needs to say and then leave. She begins her speech, admitting she is well aware she committed an act of insubordination against her uncles, but she asserts she was forced to. She explains she had to prepare a way to protect herself, even if it meant going this far. The Grand Duke looks surprised and asks her what she is talking about, repeating the word protection in confusion. She answers him calmly that the reason is she doesn't have a father or mother to protect her. The Grand Duke seems deeply affected to hear these words. She continues to explain her situation. She reminds him that, as he knows, she was deceived by her Uncle Lilas before and did not receive proper protection. To avoid this from happening again, she needs her own strength. But she points out she hasn't come of age yet and therefore doesn't have the right to act freely. She explains that her twin brothers have already established their positions and received the direct lineage necklace, enabling them to fully protect themselves. As for her, she is still far from her official debutante ball. She reveals her true motive. She did it hoping that if she prevented a loss for the Duche and earned her grandfather's recognition, he might grant her a chance to obtain the direct lineage necklace. The Grand Duke answers calmly that he understands. She is shocked by his response. The Duke corrects himself, asking her not to make him repeat the words he said earlier. He clarifies that although she did something beneficial for the family, she created a rift in the bond between family members. He adds sternly that regarding the direct lineage necklace, granting it to her now is against family law and cannot be done. Then he declares the conversation is over. He orders her to leave the room immediately. She turns to leave, thinking it seems difficult to persuade him further and she must wait for the next opportunity. She continues thinking as she leaves, noting that considering he was reprimanding her, it's strange she wasn't punished separately. Suddenly, she hears a ringing sound. She is surprised and wonders if this is a notification from the status window. The system window appears, announcing that the Duke's affection level is rising significantly, jumping from 30% to 50%. She's extremely shocked, wondering in disbelief what the system said, repeating in disbelief that the affection level reached 50%, and that this rise is happening at this very moment. Another system window appears, explaining that achieving 50% affection level with Aces Fraser grants a special benefit. A video titled The Lost Ring. She thinks excitedly that even if she doesn't know what this is, it must be something useful. The video begins to play. She wonders in confusion what is happening. Realizing what she is seeing is Duke Aces when he was young. The video confirms the scene is from decades ago, showing Aces Fraser at the age of 19. The entrance of the bride Lycian Marbian from the royal family of the Summer Continent is announced. The narration explains that the Duke and Duchess, who met through a forced political marriage,